Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the IBAC IS-BAO Safety Net webinar series, presented today with our illustrious panel of experts, Colin Russell, Peter Witten, Matthias Gropa, and our moderator, Vinter Brunbauer. My name is Catherine Hilston. I am the IS-BAO Operations Manager, and I have a couple of housekeeping items for everyone in attendance. Everyone in the audience will be on mute and will stay on mute during the presentation, but we do have a place for you to ask your questions, and we welcome those during the session. There's a control panel for GoToWebinar, and on the bottom of that panel, you'll see a place that says questions. That is where you'll type any questions or comments that you might have. Note that these come in only to the organizers, and we will be addressing those questions after the presentation and the discussion that's going on here today, talking about caring for our teams, how mental health is a vital protection in business aviation. I'm going to hand it over to the IS-BAO Program Director, Andrew Karras, to introduce our panelists. Andrew?
Hi, thank you, Catherine. Welcome, everybody. We are very excited to host this IS-BAO Progressive Stage 3 sponsored roundtable on mental health in business aviation. Mental health is increasingly recognized as a critical factor in aviation safety and performance. In the high-pressure environment of business aviation, addressing mental well-being is essential to ensuring both the safety and success of operations. Today, we will explore the role of mental health in our industry, examining regulations, support systems, and the positive impact of comprehensive mental health programs. We are grateful today to have with us a wealth of knowledge on the subject. One, Colin Russell. He's the Safety Director for FlexJet Europe. After 19 years as an Air Engineer Officer in the Royal Navy, he transitioned into civilian aviation safety, working for Bain Simmons, Thomas Cook Group Airlines, Flybe, and Lilium. Colin is passionate about leadership and mindset and supporting teams in performing safely across the aviation industry. Peter Witten is the Sales Director at Odelia Clark, specializing in impairment risk management for safety critical industries. He is also a pilot, currently flying the Boeing 787 for a major UK airline, with previous experience in the UK Royal Air Force. In 2017, Peter co-founded the Talk to a Peer peer support program, which is expanding globally to support aviation professionals. We have Matthias Gropa, Head of Mental Health and Crew Care at VistaJet. He has over 25 years in aviation, including roles as captain and training captain. He holds a PhD in psychology with research focused on acculturative stress in the cockpit and is dedicated to addressing human factors in aviation. And then our moderator, Vinter Brunbauer, a board member of the German Business Aviation Association and part of BMW's flight service team, transitioned to business aviation in 2011. With a PhD in electrical engineering and extensive experience in air ops training, he focuses on addressing mental health in small and medium-sized operators. Thank you all for volunteering your time today. Over to you, Vinter.
Thank you very much. I also like to say hello to everybody. Today we have the topic of mental health, and the question is, this is a topic which is maybe, it was addressed maybe a couple of years ago, especially in Europe within the legislation, but nevertheless the topic is very important to everybody. And now the question is, why do we need to address this topic? Maybe Peter, maybe you can start. What do you think is the importance of the mental health of pilots?
I think it's vitally important. Before I use my webcam, it's all got a bit excited there, so I sort of calmed it down a bit with the smaller one. Sorry about that. I mean, I think it's vitally important. I think we are more and more understanding that it forms such a major part of the safety of our organizations. I know there's been a lot of discussion recently, and if we look in Europe, it comes from the tragic events of the Germanwings event, but globally, it has been such a major issue for so long. I know there's data out there saying that since 2011, pilot murder suicide in Western registered aircraft is the #2 single identifiable cause, the cause of the most deaths. I mean, it is a major thing we need to discuss. I think the nuance comes from the fact that we need to look at the whole spectrum. We need to focus, yes, on the severe case. We need to, yes, focus on prevention. We also need to focus on getting ahead of the problem and trying to stop it being an issue in the first place. And finally, I think we need to focus on the early intervention where possible to try and prevent these things becoming problems before they develop into issues that can affect the safety of the flight.
Thank you very much. Colin, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, because it's the right thing to do, because it's the moral thing to do. You know, fundamentally, our job in running organizations, in delivering services, is to care about the people out there who do it every day. And if people feel cared for, and truly cared for, both physically and mentally, then they will do their best. And they will be able to focus on doing that job the way we want them to do it, the way they're expected to do it, and the way they want to do it themselves. It's when we inject stresses or we allow those stresses to take over that it causes things to go wrong. And excuse my language, but I'm going to go early. Pete knows me well enough to know that when I start swearing, that means that's when I'm getting really genuine. If we give a shit about our people, really truly give a shit about them, then they will take that to heart. And that will support them. If we don't do that, because we don't look after, we don't care for their mental health, then all we end up doing is reacting to when it goes wrong. So if we want to get ahead of ourselves and get out of this reactive mode that we're always in aviation, we've got to care about our people. And by caring about them and truly caring about them, so they feel that it's genuine, it's not just lip service, it's not just a poster on the wall, then they'll get it. And then they'll tell us, and then we'll be able to care for them. So that's really, from my perspective, that's the fundamental reason why it's important.
Thank you very much. Matthias, is this also a topic for VistaJet?
Absolutely, and I share completely the perspective from Colin that it's very important to look not only for the mental health but also for the mental well-being, because this goes hand in hand. As soon as we can assure that the flight crews feel comfortable and well and are mentally healthy, they are also willing to contribute to the flight operation much better than people who are just affected with mental health issues. So just caring for the people and seeing that, trying to attempt that they feel comfortable, I think should be on the focus of all operators worldwide, if it's smaller or bigger operators. But the benefit for the company in terms of the atmosphere which evolves from healthy and well-being people is significant.
Thank you. You mentioned already some incidents or accidents even with German wings, for example, a couple of years ago. Also the MH17 is also like a topic which is a lot. Maybe Peter, can you enlighten what was the issue, kind of what from your opinion is the reason that there was an accident, or like how did mental health was involved into this accident?
I'm answering the question with two Germans in the room.
Doesn't matter.
So I think the most important thing that Europe took out of that tragic event and the subsequent Commission regulation and where we are in Europe and what we're seeing now with the FAA ARC report, which is, if people on school haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic document that really tries to tackle the issue around mental health and aviation in a holistic manner. It's not just peer support, it's not just talking therapy, it's not just medication. It is how can we look at it as a whole package. It's a superb document, and I think hopefully the UK and Europe will follow along. But what was the most important thing? Would having peer support have prevented German wings? My personal opinion is no, because there were lots of other barriers that didn't prevent the event, and I don't think the addition of peer support, the addition of psychological subsystem, the addition of pre-employment psychological evaluation would have individually prevented that event. But it started a conversation. It started a conversation about how we can treat our people better, as Colin and Matthias said, how we can address a subject that is so full of stigma in our world and such an undiscussable subject. And it forced the conversation, and that is so valuable, because now we are aware that the regulation came from German wings. We have moved so far beyond that. We've moved to such a better place where, as I say, the support we're offering now is more of a holistic approach. It's trying to tackle it from all angles, not just to prevent that one one event.
Colin, you were nodding.
I think the really interesting thing that came out from Germanwings, if you take it back to its baseline, is it broke the myth that pilots are gods. It showed that pilots are actually human. Sorry to burst the bubble of a lot of pilots out there, but it showed, what I mean by that is it showed the reality of pilots as humans. Yeah, because we're all subject to mental challenges and life challenges thrown at us at a number of times. And pilots are no different from any other group of people, organization. In fact, it's probably almost worse because of the cultures and the previous behaviors, etc., and that hero worshipping kind of status that meant that actually it broke that, it opened that up, and then the regulation came in behind it to support us with some of the tools and processes, but it allowed us to talk about it. And that's been the most powerful thing, because now when you talk about it, you're not seen as an outlier. You're seen as it's part of the core responsibility of organizations now to care for their teams and care for their mental health as well, and well-being, as you said, Matthias. So by doing that, it's given us the opportunity to be very open. Now we've had to, unfortunately, aviation is built on learning from previous accidents. We've had to learn because of Germanwings, but we need to then really value the lesson we've learned and use it. If we go back to a stage where 10 years time we've forgotten the lessons of Germanwings, then we've failed. It gave us an opportunity to understand that our pilots and everyone involved in the operation, because it's not just a pilot thing, but it's everyone involved in operations, suffer the same challenges that everyone in life can suffer from, and therefore we need to be able to protect against it, because we're in a high reliability, safety critical industry. The outcomes are a lot worse in our sector, but the challenges that cause them are the same across everywhere in life.
Matthias, what are the examples you're discussing within VistaJet?
Yes, I mean, of course, we have introduced it with the regulation 1042 as of February 21, and of course, it was still COVID times and affected by COVID. There was, of course, not a very high response rate to this program. However, with the years going by, we could see there was a high acceptance rate. That was actually, after my first audit, I was kind of proud that they said we have higher response rate than major big companies at the same time. So that felt for me like the air crews developed trust in the program. This was for me also the key for setting up this program, is that the pilots and the flight attendants trust into this program, so they know if they report anything into this peer support program, it's 100% confidential. It stays in between me and the other person. And seen by this, I could see, also in agreement with the management, we had a couple of options which we could offer to the pilots, and this was very well accepted. And so currently we are now considering how we can actually expand this, because we know there is, beside pilots peer support, there is our other options of support we can offer. Professional outside help, or in Germany, for example, we have the Stiftung Mayday, which is very popular in providing support for peers, and so just to extending the range to increase the reach of the pilots. So ultimately, we want to have all pilots and flight attendants who are starting to face a mental health problem. And we also try to pick them up earlier, not when the problem gets like really big, like big depression or anxiety disorder, but when it starts to get us negative into thinking. That means like when they start to develop repetitive negative thinking by itself, which then ends up in a bigger problem. And if you reach them at this point and they have awareness about the availability of the program, then we have achieved something which our end aim, let's say.
Thank you. Peter, what are the main modes of providing support? How can it look like? The main modes of providing support to these mental health issues. I mean, how can you address it? I mean, we just said there's a support, but how can this support look like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's so broad. I think the key thing is to have something that suits the organisation. Every organisation is subtly different. There are obviously a lot of similarities, but every organisation is different, and it's having an approach that best suits that. I think for me, the key element are that you are not overly focusing on one particular point in someone's mental health journey. And by that, I mean that having preemptive, preventative tools out there, focusing on 5 ways of well-being, focusing on supporting your people when they're well, the physical analogies being, healthy food and exercise, which we know connects hugely to the mental place someone is in. But having that is superb, that's great, but it can't be done at the expense of the other end of the spectrum, that intervention, red flag behavior type support, and then with peer support somewhere in the middle. Obviously, a program will probably contain all these bits, but peer support sat in the middle somewhere of that, having a reactive element of the well-being issues, but also being able to respond to the more severe issues as they arise. So, I think for me, it's having that full spectrum of care and not overemphasizing one part at the expense of another. Do you mind if I just mention one thing very quickly? Because apologies to taking you off the rails a second, Colin Mateus, something I'd love to very briefly mention, which is I feel like we're at the place in aviation with mental health and the similarity to CRM, in the sense that when CRM came in, it was cockpit resource management, because decision making ended at that flight deck door. And then it progressed to crew resource management. And certainly in my 20 years, flying planes, I was lucky enough to join when it was crew resource management, and we accepted that it wasn't just pilots making the decision. But even when I was learning, it was, right, we've done our flying, we've done our sim, now let's do some CRM. And we'll tick the CRM box and then move on to the important stuff, which is flying the airplane and operating the airplane. And now when I look at what operators are doing around the world, CRM is just part of everything. You wouldn't dream of doing a sim and doing a CRM section of your sim. That would be insanity. In the same way, I can see the progress. If you're looking for a great example, Air India have a superb approach where they are trying to get peer support and mental health into every single aspect of what they do, be it reporting, be it briefing, be it debriefing, about everything, and it's interwoven throughout. And I do feel like we are on that journey, and that's where we will be in 5 to 10 years. So sorry, I want to just throw that in as well.
Great, thank you, Colin. Sorry, Colin.
Sorry, just to continue that bit about the equivalence with CRM. We do CRM recurrent annual training. Everybody does, tick, well done. But we invite, we do join with our cabin service, but we also invite our ops teams and our camo main troll staff to join in as well, because it's the whole operational bit and the relationships, and so it's very similar with peer support. The idea that peer support is only for pilots, well, that's what the regulation says. But yeah, but cabin servers, whether they're flight attendants or cabin servers, bring them in. They're part of the team. What about the ops people? They suffer from the stresses of life. And actually, when they're trying to juggle a very complex, particularly in our sector, in business aviation, we don't have long planned schedules and everything's routine and runs on rails. No, business aviation is so much more volatile and variable that the stresses the ops controllers are under, my God, and they are safety critical as well. What about the technicians that are working on the aircraft? They're subject to divorce, mental health challenges, financial stresses, just as much as pilots. So why aren't we looking after them? Because if they screw up some maintenance, then we know from evidence that accidents happen just as badly caused by maintenance as they are caused by pilots. So the idea of, we had to start somewhere, great, we've got a hook, but we've got to recognize that actually it's broadening in right out early, and some of the lessons and sharing, and it can be divisive. If you give this amazing, incredible support to pilots, but you don't give it to your technicians, or you don't give it to your ops staff, then why do they get it? What about us? Is my mental health not as important as their mental health? Ouch, it's a bit harsh. So again, where we have the ability to broaden and even just talk about it, we don't need to have the formal structures, etc. But whatever tools we can provide and whatever language we can use across everybody, that's how we grow it into becoming a business enabler. Actually, because if you have great people who you care about and are thriving at work, then your business is going to succeed. If you've got people who are overloaded and mentally stressed and not being able to focus on their world, then your business isn't going to be doing great either. So it's in our all interest to really care for and get stuck into it, but not just by pilots, etc., but across the company. Sorry, you kind of got me going a little bit there, Pete. And, sorry, you'll learn. Yeah.
Matthias?
Yes, and I fully agree with Peter and Colin. This is important to have it as a holistic approach. We integrated. I hear an echo of my voice. I don't know if you hear it as well. And so far we had to place the focus on the variety of options for the crews. That means, like, first one is the pilot peer support program, and the second option is just to see what professional help we can make available, or they can choose by themselves, or what self-help options are available. So now we are just currently we have a little research on how resilience techniques could be used to make them stronger, even to give them some kind of toolkit to improve their mental health. And this has, in the small-scale research project, has even shown that this can add some significant value. And if we standardize it among crews and then later on also the flight ops team, I think we have a massive added value for the mental health and well-being of all our team.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. There is this system peer support out there. How does this work? So maybe Peter, you can address that.
Sorry, the line's not great. I'll say that one more time, sorry.
So there's a system, peer support system out there. How does this work? I mean, if the one or the other participant doesn't really know what peer support is, can you just explain what it means?
Yeah, absolutely. So at its very, very simplest, strip everything back. Peer support is speaking to someone who is able to empathize with your situation, and with whom you're able to build fairly instant rapport, and on top of that, separation, anonymity, whatever you want to call it. So it is the ability to reach out to, you know, in a pilot's case, flight attendants or cabin service, someone in a similar role, although I do have a view on that a little bit, but in normally 99% of cases to a similar role, and that instant communication, that instant rapport, that instant ability to empathize what it's like to, for example, be down route, be tired, have the stresses of a sim, etc. It allows the conversation to flow easier. A good example of when that works well is if it is an aviation focused issue or something like that. You don't want to speak to an EAP. You might spend the first 20 minutes explaining what your SEP is, or what your LPC is, or something like that. And it allows you to skip straight to a point of understanding. So at its super basic level, it's sort of rapport plus that empathy plus separation anonymity is the peer support. Slightly broader, if I may, you have a program that encompasses that. Your program should be doing more. Your program needs your mental health professionals involved. It needs high quality training, initial and recurrent. It needs to be sensitively and appropriately, with full due regard to anonymity, collecting what little information it does, to use that little information to increase the safety of those within the program. And you need the volunteers. You need the support volunteers who are providing that support. So very, very briefly, 4 hours condensed into 10 seconds, that is, in my mind at least, what peer support is.
Thank you. Colin, does peer support also works within FlexJet?
Yeah, so we, when I joined, I'd inherited peer support, the structure is set up, and very openly, we use Adelia Clark, so we use the program that Pete has, and I'm very happy to say that. Because it works. So there are two different models. One is to have an internal peer support program where you train your own volunteers, and you have a system or process that allows any person to contact one of your own internal volunteers. Or you can join a collaborative function, which is what Adelia Clark generates, where you have a number of people trained across a number of companies. And actually, we find a benefit in that. So when we go online, one of our team wants to register a peer support, some kind of help, they put their details in, and it asks them which company they work for, which means they will get contacted by somebody who's not at FlexJet, but they are a peer, so they're either a cabin server or a flight crew, whatever, which means they can relate in the same language, but they're not going to get a phone call from somebody that they know that they might be flying with next week, or that they might really not want to say because it's internal to the company. But they are still a peer because they're still in the same environment, predominantly business aviation. They're still talking about simulator sessions, or being a cabin server, or being on an ops team, whatever it might be. And by doing that, you get this great support, but you also have this additional layer of trust, because it's confidentiality that leads to trust. And they feel they can speak openly. It's not going to get back into the company in any way. So that's how we work, and we're seeing some really good uptake rates. And we're promoting it to encourage people to use it. And first off, it's, well, what is this? How is it different from an EAP? And even working with HR to help HR understand how it differs from the EAP has been quite interesting to say, no, these are people who are trained, and actually we've trained a number of volunteers now, and we've added people to the pool, the Adelia, in this case, the pool enabled by Adelia Clark. So our pilots and cabin servers, we recently trained 4 pilots, 4 cabin servers, and they're part of the pool. So I know they're getting calls through Adelia Clark to help other companies. And I know that our team are calling into the pool and getting support from other companies, trained peer support volunteers. So it works out really nicely for us.
Colin, just a question. What do you think is the minimum number, or like the critical number of people you need for such a peer support? So do you have to have like 100 or like 1,000 or 50 already sufficient?
I don't think there's any number. I think if you're trying to do it internally, it's very tricky if you're trying to do it internally in a small group, because you all know each other, you all fly with each other. It's very hard to have a confidential chat, and very quickly it's the manager becomes the peer support volunteer, and that breaks down the intent of a peer as opposed to some kind of hierarchy. If you're very, very large, so you're talking thousands of pilots, then an internal system would work, because you get to a stage where you can almost be anonymous within that business, but and that can demonstrate it. But there are companies that have tried internal and gone external or gone sort of collaborative. I'm sure there are other companies that have got very successful internal programs. They tend to be, that I would suggest, the ones with successful internal programs tend to have either 1 or 2 people who are exceptionally good at the confidentiality. They're quite rare. Or that they've got a large company where you've got that almost built-in anonymity because you're a part of it. I mean, Pete, I don't know how many pilots there are in the airline you currently fly with, but I know they have an internal program.
I was just going to mention it, if I may. It's a really interesting question. What is that number, right? So when we started, it was called MAPS at the time, became the program known Talk to a Peer now. We used a number of 250 people. We thought if you've got less than 250 people, you need we can understand how you need that collaborative approach. More than 250, you can probably do it internally. Then we started talking to organizations that had more than 250 people. And we went, okay, maybe it's closer to 500, 750. And our logic was around, if you are an individual, if we look at the terrible underrepresentation of women in certainly if we talk pilots for a minute, pilots. And then if you are a female pilot in an organization, maybe you have an accent that's different to everyone else. Well, guess what? You've just lost anonymity. Or you're the only female in the company who's pregnant currently. Again, you've lost anonymity. So we said, okay, maybe it's close to 1,000 people. What we are finding, we recently took on an operator story about 4,000 people, pilots and cabin crew, and we are seeing that it's about anonymity. It is, and with the smaller, with operators of 100 less, and that sort of area, it's the main thing is that ability to step outside. But what we're finding, and it's surprising us, is even with the larger operators, we don't know what the upper end of is. It's the perceived trust, if you like. It's the ability to step outside, but it's more just the feeling of stepping outside. It's not that I might speak to Pete, who I might see on the flight deck or in the galley tomorrow. It's more the feeling that I can talk to someone who is outside of my organization. And we are seeing significant increases in usage rate once that has been made available to people that are stepping outside. So I honestly don't think we know yet. You look at some of the American, 25,000 people. I've got to believe that at that point, there's enough critical mass of pilots for true anonymity, but maybe not. Maybe in the future, we'll see those large, US airlines collaborating in some way to allow step aside, and maybe that'll see an increase in engagement, usage, and trust. I.e., every time we think we've hit the limit of, well, with this number of people, we'll see no change of, a third-party provider or ability to step aside won't make a difference, we're proven wrong. And providing that option increases engagement usage. So I don't know where that number sits yet. It will be interesting to see.
I think it's interesting because that number or that scale, whatever it might be, it could be 100 people, and it works really, really well, because the level of trust, the feeling, that perception of knowing you can share anything, and it's going to be dealt with the right way. If you can, you might be in an incredible company of 50 people where everybody can share everything and it's always handled absolutely spot on. There aren't many large organizations where that perception of trust is strong. They talk about the company. The moment they talk about the company, you haven't got that emotional bond, that connection, that level of trust. So the moment you start talking about the company and you get to organizations where they talk about the HQ, the headquarters, the OCC, whatever it might be, and they're talking in that kind of language, straight away it's very hard to have that emotional connection, and that's where trust comes from. Trust is an emotional bond. It's not a process. So actually that's really where the challenge lies. If a company doesn't have a great HR relationship or a great union relationship, you're not going to have a fantastic peer support program internally, because that emotional trust is never going to be there. So if you've got a difficult union relationship, a difficult HR relationship, a difficult management relationship, you can have a great process, you can have all the resources you like, but you're still going to have a low utilization rate. And really, but if you think back to why are we doing this? Why are we doing the peer support element? Why are we doing this care for our teams bit? It's there to help people talk about the stuff they don't want to, they do want to talk about, but they don't know who to talk about it with, and they're scared they're going to talk to the wrong person and it's going to have an impact on them. That's why we've got this whole problem in the first place. So anything we can do to help people share something that's a burden to them, that we know will ease that burden the moment they share it. However we can enable that sharing, that's what we're after. It doesn't matter about the process, it doesn't matter about the result, it's how do we help give them the best opportunity to start to offload and share something that's concerning them.
Thank you very much. Matthias, what's your experience with peer support?
Yes, I share, of course, the perspectives, and additionally to this is, of course, the size of the company matters as well. So, for example, we are a very global oriented team, and we have crew members from pretty much all around the world. And from my experience, the proximity of the peer plays a crucial role in the person who wants to address the peer, because, for example, the Spanish flight attendant would not so much contact a German captain, for example. So it means, like, if we have like a peer supporter who is like has the cultural proximity to crew member, and we can achieve a lot. And because we have also to see the range of problems is very different. We cannot always assume there is always everyone who is seeking for support is suicidal. We have a big range. It starts from family problems until to whatever kind of alcohol problems. And so we have to make sure we can cover the whole range of the variety of problems which are coming to us. And so this is also why we need different peers available. It's like one peer might be better for support in different areas, and also we have to make sure that we have a peer available for the similar cultural background of the crew member.
Matthias, I think that's a really, really important point, and actually that's again one of the benefits when you're managing a peer support program, rather than rather than having to just get a random person assigned to you, or a hotline where you just pick up the next peer available. I think it's a really important point that there are some people who will be able to create a better bond and create that open trust, because a good example is, I don't know, apologies for anyone, but a cancer. If you've just been diagnosed with cancer and you need to talk, and you can't talk to your partner or family or whatever about it, and you really want to share that, being able to, if you said in your request for peer support, you give you a little bit of an outline of the problem you want to discuss, and they assign somebody to you who is prepared to support you because they've gone through a similar experience, that bond, that trust is so much stronger from the very outset, and that openness and that sharing is very strong. The same with a family bereavement or something like that. You straight away you get that bond, and I think that's a power that peer support needs to harness, because that's something that you'll never get from a sort of trained counselor. It's a different kind of support you get. Now you've got to be careful you don't get you don't get the peer supporters too engaged, because then you have to look after them as well. But actually, I think, Matthias, you've just summed up why it doesn't matter how you manage your peer support program. What matters is you create that bond, and having the relevance or the connection is actually one of the strongest things you can do. Pete, I know you've had experience with that stuff.
Yeah, I'm absolutely agree, Colin, and Matthias, exactly what you said. Again, just be careful here, not wanting to say anything that breaches any anonymity, but the reason I sort of said that 99.99% of the time, pilot talks to pilot, that's great. We have had cases, and this is why I strongly believe you need a human at the centre of this, as opposed to, as Colin mentioned, the first come, first serve. We have had cases where we intentionally put a pilot with a cabin crew member or vice versa, or other working groups, because the life event that has smashed through that person's existence is of a type that other person, yes, they might be the other side of the flight deck door, but they get aviation, right? They know what it's like to be working a long time. They get jet lag, they get fatigue, they get what is affecting this person, what is contributing to this already horrendous life event and making it worse because we're all setting ourselves up to fail in aviation with our lifestyles. They get enough of that actually it's more valuable to have the person who has that shared life experience, has had the post-traumatic growth of that event, and can better relate to that person. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
We just talked about the flight crews and the cabin crews. How about the rest of the crew, like the crew of the company? Does this also apply to them?
So if I may, from a regulatory standpoint, there is a superb sentence in the EASA regulation that mysteriously vanished in the CAA regulation, but I and others are working hard to get it put back in. And what it says is that nothing shall prevent an operator from rolling out the support to other safety critical personnel. So I think we are at the start of a journey. I understand why it started with pilot. Colin mentioned this. I'm actually writing a presentation at the moment discussing this very subject, why I understand why we focus on pilots. I strongly disagree. It can only work for pilots. In the very early days of this program, I had a senior manager at an airline say to me that PS4 can only work for pilots because of the, quote, introspective nature of their training. I strongly disagree with that. But I understand why we started with pilots. They're expensive, the mistakes are visible, etc., etc. But I do think more and more we understand that the other working groups, cabin crew is the natural place to go to next. Engineering is a group we are working with, an increasing amount of working with. But as Colin said as well, ops, anyone in an operation can be safety critical, because any decision anyone is making can impact the safety of the flight. So that EASA sentence is super powerful, and I know the ARC report is leaning that way of, we understand pilots first, get that, I get that because of the visible errors, etc., etc. But I do believe the movement is to more holistically cover an operation, which is just so positive.
Mm-hmm. Colin?
Yeah, I mean, we're the same. So we included cabin service straight off. That was already when I joined. We're already looking and scoping how do we get into the ops team is my next call. We don't have our own 145 technicians really. We've got a couple. So I'm looking at how do we grow it internally in the business. Ideally, I want to. The trouble is, once you start to get outside of the operational side of the business and you get into the very support side, then do you open it up to IT? Do you open it up to owner services and sales and administration, etc.? That's really what the EAP is for in an organization. If you have some kind of health insurance, you're going to have some kind of employee assistance program. It's where you have an operational, and you think back to, well, all the EASA regulations are written for safety of flight. So that's really where you draw your boundary. If they can have an operational impact on the safety of flight, could they be in scope of your EAP? And I think much like CRM, much like a lot of other initiatives, it will grow and will be drawn into the regulations, no doubt. I would expect it to become part of the regulations in Part 145, if I'm honest. For ground, we're developing ground regulations. Some of the work that the ground handling teams, refuelers do, etc., they have just as much chance of being distracted or affected by some kind of mental health event or issue in their life that causes them to get it wrong. And we've seen ground events that have led to significant fatalities. So I can see over the years how it's going to grow, and we're going to see the benefits and it's going to come into it. Some companies have decided make the decision to go earlier than that. Some companies will wait and be pushed into it.
Mm-hmm. Matthias, who's addressed the new company?
Now we have also trained a few peers from the operation part. However, the amount of reports or cases were like really scalable, I have to say. But also we were focusing the focus still on the pilots, because for them it's still the most significant in terms of the license. We still have this bianguity between the AME, that's where they have to pass their medical, and the psychological part, and still we have to. The biggest problem I see is still to convince them that they can have trust in the program, because this is a separate unit from the medical part, and And I know there is a huge discussions currently in Europe, at least, with the MeSafe project to change also the role of the AME. However, I feel it's a strongly recommend, first of all, to keep a boundary where peer support starts and ends clearly, to see where the task of the AME will start. And I think this is for us at the moment still the focus, because we will have some issues, of course, from which can arise during the peer support, which have to be reported. But still, then it has to be clearly communicated that this is a case where it requires AME support or AME involvement. In the other cases, if the boundary is not clear, the trust will not come up from the pilots, which we see as very relevant or necessary in order to get the numbers higher. This is actually at the moment our more priority is to see more involvement. We want to see more pilots and flight attendants to participate in the program, whatever mode they use. And so if we get an increase there, this is at the moment at least our main focus.
Thank you. From an operator's perspective, for the operators who are not participating yet, what are the major barriers to participate or not to participate, or kind of what should be solved that they can enter more easily? Who wants to start?
It's still a complex process. It's also realized by EASA that the introduction of the regulation 215 is a complex, but also EASA encourages for smaller operators to use tunnel and peer support providers because they know this is not easy to set up a complex program which is required at the moment. So, but at least in Europe, it's mandatory to have this program in place. So that means like every operator must have or shall have a program in place. So it's not some voluntary thing. So if you ask the operators and the EASA had evaluated, they had come back with a questionnaire to the operators, and there was not very high, I think about roughly 14 to 18 operators, % of the operators responded to this survey. However, the implementation, I would say, is still in the beginning, even if it's 2 years old, but we had COVID, which made it more difficult to raise the cases. And now the peer support gets more established, and we can also see rising numbers of participants. And yeah, I even feel like there's a generation change. Now, Generation Z is more likely to address issues in terms of well-being rather than Generation X. And so we see these issues, and if you see this from the operator's perspective, so then you either have to hire like an external expert, or you have to set up the program with a task force, and these are the options basically which are available in Europe. I mean, this is, as I said, it's a very European thing, because this mandatory regulation is only it relates to the EASA member states.
I think it's interesting because the first bit is why. What's in it for me? What's in it for us? Why do it? Why as a business? Because ultimately, it's the people who own the purse strings, who own the budgets, that are going to have to make the decision. So they're the ones we have to help understand. Why is it a good thing for them as a business to do this? We were fortunate if you lived in the EASA land, that they became a regulatory requirement. We had the compliance period, etc., all that sort of bit, and that was a good driver. But there are other companies outside of Europe who've got peer support programs, and they see the value of it, and they obviously saw something in the value of it outside of a regulatory compliance need. And that's the bit I think we need to hook into. Why is it good to care for our teams? Why is it good to give our teams tools to help them care for themselves and resolve and protect their mental health? That's the question that we need to ask or demonstrate the answer to. So where organizations have got a good system, a good process, a good peer support program, and other mental health solutions and tools, it's helped their crews become more resilient, it's helped them become more effective, it's improved the availability of them, but it's also given safety, the safety of the operation, a boost. And I think if you can articulate that in a way that causes them to go, yeah, I want that, then they'll pull it into the business. And I think this is, a regulator can only push things on the business. They can't cause businesses to pull it in. So there'll still be companies that aren't yet fully compliant because they're dragging their heels, because they don't see the value. It's something they have to do at some point the latest possible date because the regulator's checking, and they'll do the minimum. And there are other companies outside of the EASA world who've already pulled this kind of mindset in because they see the benefit of it, and that's the real crux. So what's in it for that particular operator? Why is it good to care for your team and give them the tools to care for themselves?
I think it's following it's flipping that conversation. It's flipping it to why it's so good. I have not infrequently been given the challenge, especially, and I'm talking small corporate operators here, and it's a completely fair challenge, and I completely understand where they're coming from. And the fear is that the pilot's walking out to fly the owner or the client of the day, and for some reason we decide that that person's not fit to fly and suddenly they're left without a pilot. What do? They say, I'm not an airline, I haven't got a bunch of guys on reserve I can just pull in, I'm not a big corporate operator with guys I can haul in. What do I do? And look, it's a fair concern, I understand, but it's about flipping the question to what Colin's saying there. We're about supporting and preventing. If we were to, and heaven forbid, knocking on all the wood, it's so insanely unusual, but if we were to the point where someone had to get taken off a flight, you really, really don't want that person getting airborne with that client on that day. So let's park that, and now let's focus on the fact that it is part of your care. And normally, these small operators, they do care for their client. They often describe to me as families. These are small family setups who they care for the people. They have personal relationships, with these people. There is trust there. They are afraid of exposing themselves to getting that more information. They're afraid of exposing themselves to a program which they think will highlight these things. And I understand that, I do, but it's on its head. It's flipped on its head. It's focusing on supporting and protecting. And Matthias, you mentioned resilience earlier, and I think it's so great. I do. My only concern around resilience is I feel like as an industry, we are where we are with resilience now, with where we were with well-being maybe 5-10 years ago, where there are some superb well-being providers out there. There are also a lot of people who just sell well-being. I'm not quite sure because it's a tag word that everyone's excited about at the moment. At the moment, the word of the day, the word of the year is resilience. There are some superb providers out there. We don't tend to work with providing that, so I can say that there's superb providers out there really focusing on resilience and how we build up resilience within our crew. However, one quick scan of LinkedIn and there's 400 people just advertising resilience as a throwaway line. So I do think it's super important. And I like your approach today to where you are, it's part of a study. You are using it to look at outcomes and stuff. That I really like that approach. Sounds really positive.
Thank you.
No, this is, of course, I want to add this as well. If you succeed in getting the crews resilient and get them a well-being approach, I mean, this one increases an incredible value for the company. Imagine for the day-to-day business, if you have employees who are kind of knowing how to deal with adversities and problems in life, and if they see like the glass half full than half empty, I mean, this is an advantage you cannot assess in money, because they completely can change the entire approach with the entire operation and the face to the customer incredibly if they just sense this positive attitude rather than the negative attitude. And this is also one of our focus points, is like, how can we really create a crews who can really sense the positive attitude towards the customer, the positive face. And this, I personally feel like resilience training plays a key role there, because resilience offers like easy takeaway tools where you can improve your own well-being and own mental health. And I see that in the future a lot of options or possibilities to train in these areas.
You said that trust is very important. So if you have an operator who wants to step into this topic seriously, what would be your advice to him to increase the trust? Who wants to start? Maybe Matthias?
Well, I mean, the trust is very, as I said, really the most crucial part. So without trust, you can forget about the program. You can destroy pretty much the program in one day if there's only one case where one pilot or lieutenant has to make a negative experience. So you can forget the program for the next year. Seriously, this is no joke. So and this is also, everybody is aware, at least at researchers, that trust is the absolute key. It means like, what stays in this program? It stays in this program. We have what is called safe zone established. Within the safe zone, where it's completely agreed and reconfirmed that there is nothing going to any other party. However, if the peer wants some support in a specific way, like a time off or some other kind of aid, of course, then we agree in common what modes we should choose or what options are available in order to help the crew member. But until then, nothing goes out, and this is the most important part. If this is breached, then the program is over.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
100% agree. I think, we discussed during our pre-call, as you say, it takes forever to build and it can be destroyed in a heartbeat. So the first thing is it takes time. Don't expect to have an incredibly trusted program the first day you implement it, because then you've got to demonstrate, trust is earned, not given. The other thing I'd say very briefly is, when I'm asked specifically by, senior leaders within an organization, my answer is to make yourself vulnerable. Show that you too are human. There's nothing I think more powerful than a senior leader within an organization saying, I struggled in the past. I had these problems. This is what I did, and this is the process I went through, and I came out the other side, and I learned this from it. And by sharing their own personal story, by sharing their own personal vulnerabilities, and we've spoken about barriers to entry and the stigma around mental health and aviation. If your senior leaders can stand up and share their own personal story, it's not going to instantly guarantee 100% trust in the program, but it's a great starting point to demonstrate that.
Colin, do you want to add something to that?
Really, it's like Pete said, it's the leaders going first. Lead by being humble, lead by supporting, lead by recognizing the challenge and saying, this won't be, I'm not expecting you all to dial in first, but by the way, I had a problem once, and I share that with my team whenever we do our safety for car and I'm introducing peer support. I talk about some of the challenges I've had. I've been on antidepressants twice. I don't mind saying that because I've needed it, and they've been a great tool, and I've had huge support. So that to me is very powerful because it shows that it's real. And I recognize that, hey, we're all in this in the same way. But the ability to get a program going, to get the buy-in for the program before they commit to the program, and even once they've launched the program, just takes time. It takes time, and it takes continual positively reinforcing the good bits, sharing, promoting. We get some statistics of usage, and I explain why it's really important that I get to know how well the system is being used and how well people trust it. Because if no one trusts it, that's not a good thing. Or if everyone's using it, that's really not a good thing either, because it means we've got some bigger problems, and I'll need to get to the bottom of those. So I understand that, but I never know what the subjects are about, but I know that people are using it, and that to me is a good barometer.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we should ask our audience if there are any questions. Andrew? No, we cannot hear you yet.
I got it now. Thank you. Thank you, Ventir. Thank you all. We have some questions from the chat here. One of them, Colin, you were given a shout out by a former colleague or associate of yours. So he says, how do you think the values of the provider affect the provision and buy-in for the service? And also, how do you show these values in practice, and how can you align them to your company?
Wow, it's what's in here that counts, and it's trust. Back to the trust. You trust based on values and connections and behavior, and the behaviors of the demonstration of that. So it's really important that you have the same mindset and the same set of values. If you work with a business that is solely focused on numbers and business and financials, that will come across very much. If you work with a business that clearly cares about your people and tells you and can prove to you how they're caring for your people or enabling your people to care, it's a great connection. I'm delighted that Pete is on the call here, and I'm not biased. I've just come across a great organization that I trust, and I trust them to help me care for the teams that we have. So we share, Pete and I share values, and I know that goes all the way into his team. His team have come on site and trained ours. We put a whole bunch of pilots and cabin servers in, and the team from Adelia Clark came and trained them, and we had a great connection. And therefore, the trust and that shared values came across to our peer support volunteers, but also got out into the wider team. So they know that because I trust Pete and Pete's team, that they can trust Pete and Pete's team, so they'll share. And that's the importance of the values bit. And the second question, sorry, I was so busy focusing on the first bit. The second bit was?
Let me get back to it. How do you show these values in practice, and how can you align them to the company?
Well, sorry, so I think I pretty much answered that, but publicly. Demonstrating it, talking about stories. You know, Pete shares a lovely story that he's been through himself, and when he shares that, people connect with him and they empathize with him and they recognize the value of it. I do the same. I share stories, and I share stories of where I can disidentify and share. I can say that one of our team here has talked to a peer support through Adelia Clark, and they got great service. I haven't said who it was, I haven't said what it was about, but I can tell them that it was a great outcome. So that's really, it's the storytelling. Storytelling builds trust.
Oh, great. Thank you. We have another question here, and I think that goes into kind of the storyline, and it's open to anybody. But how do organizations prove that the program is effective? And maybe this is directed, Peter. Maybe you have some examples of how, in generality, of how organizations have seen this program, peer support, to be effective, and then anybody else on the panel that might be able to add to that.
It's a superb question. You can't prove a negative. We can't say that because of the support we provide, X event would not have happened and didn't happen. We can't say that. We talk about usage rates. It is a blunt tool in terms of measuring engagement with the program, but it is a measure. It's one number, right? It's one way to look at whether a program is engaging. If nothing else, it gives you a trend. I'm going to get the exact people wrong on this, and my deepest apologies, especially in the webinar. I believe it was Billy Hoffman and Herwin, Billy of well, UND, half universities in America and the US Air Force, and Herwin of Pan New Zealand did a paper, and they were looking, that they tried to establish, what is the maximum usage rate? What do we think the perfect peer support program on the perfect day? What would the whole population usage rate look like? And I want to say, forgive me guys, at 12 or 13%, something like that. So that is potentially a metric that we can target towards, because on the one hand, for us, we believe that where peer support is in its life cycle, it's all about getting that usage rate up, as a single metric. We want to look at other things as well, escalation, so et cetera, but as a single metric, that's one way we can internally, how are we doing, how can we show ourselves that we are improving, what works, see the spike in usage rate, etc. And that's really important. In time, and I'm talking quite a long way in advance, with all the resilience work that a lot of operations are doing, in theory, one might be able to point at that maximum number starting to come down, right? Because people are more resilient, because we're addressing mental health earlier. I can't remember, forgive me, who mentioned generational change earlier. I look at the guys I trained in the Air Force and how much more sensible they are and how much more able to talk about these things they are. And that percentage might start coming down as the generations roll over. So I think it's an ongoing subject. But I mean, to answer the question directly, it's really hard. It's really hard to prove effectiveness. Usage rates are one metric, and at least if you are an internal program or internally within yourselves, at least tracking stuff like that, tracking escalations, tracking number of calls to complete a case, tracking time to complete a case, all these things are internal metrics you can use for how are we doing, at least are we seeing an increase in engagement, are we seeing an increase in buy-in, et cetera, but it is I know there are some very smart people, very smart academics currently doing work on this to try and get some better answers than I've been able to give here.
Thank you, Peter. Matthias, Vinti, or Colin, do you have a story that you can share about proving the effectiveness and the investment in this type of program in your organization?
Matthias, let you go.
Yeah, we have established like another areas. We have KPIs which we monitor, and depending on, and from these KPIs we just see if there's a trend visible. So this is basically the main idea, because it's as Peter said, it's very hard to measure absolute numbers. However, trends can be monitored, and as I mentioned before, that we also authorize the crews to use outside options, we sometimes do not even know which option they use, because we do not keep track of those. So unless the crew member another crew member has referred the case, we do not know about this. So the only mode, but we use, and this is also kind of helpful, is these KPIs where we monitor the numbers and the case, etc. And this is, I think this is something I would even recommend for other companies as well, because it gives you at least a trend if you do it in-house.
I think for me, there's two parts. One is the training and the feedback from the training as well. You can't just have a peer support program without helping to raise the training and awareness. So how you can monitor the engagement in the training in various ways. You can look at a little feedback form after the training. You could do a sort of short questionnaire 3 months after the training's been delivered to see whether people have remembered it and whether they've valued it. So because that's part of that education piece. If people understand it, you might not have a high usage rate, but you have a high awareness rate, which tells you, where you are, and the difference between those. If you have a low awareness rate and a high usage rate, that tells a different story. So actually understanding how aware people are and how much they're using it are two great indicators that work together. I asked Pete and his team, I asked them for a quarterly update on usage rates. And also, because it's a collaborative program, I can ask for a comparator. I said, your usage rate across your group is, across all your different clients, is say 2%. Our usage rate is 4%. Okay. Do I sit there and go, job done? No, because we're still down at 4%. But if he says your usage rate has doubled in the last quarter, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. So again, indicators just help you look to answer questions. How effective is my peer support program? That's the question I want the answer to. And there's various ways. I get, because of the confidentiality as a safety manager, I get feedback on people using the system. I call the peer support volunteer, right? And we can talk about it. And all I say is, I don't need to know the detail of what you talk about. If they want to share with me, how did it go? Is there anything we could do better? And just by asking those questions, when I am aware that people have used the system, again, I get some feedback, I can promote it. So I think understanding the awareness and the usage are the two key metrics to look at.
Oh, great.
I also think that the topic is very important they talk about. I mean, like you said, the 2 and 4%. I mean, the more boring the topics are, the better it is. The earlier I call in and say there's an issue I'm dealing with, then the more help I can get. Not that I'm already kind of at the edge, and then I call in and say, like, well, either you help me or I commit suicide tomorrow. I guess this is also like hard to measure, of course, because it's anonymous. But nevertheless, I guess the more the people call in early, the more help they get, and then the more effective the system is.
Pete, did you get that? Pete, did you get that?
Yeah, I think it's a great. So the metrics we collect, because you're right, it is a bit tricky. So we measure things like escalation. Was an escalation required in-house to mental health professional?
Which is
was suicidal thoughts discussed? Did a follow-up call required? Could you signpost the person effectively? These sort of things, and that is exactly what you're saying, to try and establish severity of call. And we collect, very, very broad subjects as well. But you're absolutely right. It's why I come back around to usage as a blunt tool. It's definitely not one number that matters. It's a really useful tool to as you were saying, to trend. You can see changes in that, and that's super positive. But it is not the one number that everything flows from. It's just a useful starting point.
No, thank you, gentlemen. I think we have time for one last question, and I think this is a good one. We're just standing up a program in our company. What piece of advice do you have to get our personnel engaged? And you could add, how do we establish that trust and some elements of preventing a breakdown in that trust from senior management to frontline personnel? I'll open it up to anyone.
I'll start then. So I would reiterate what I said before about the rollout so important. Rollout is absolutely vital to engage that initial trust. And again, as senior managers, Colin was talking about as well, showing the vulnerability, telling your own story, showing that it's cliche as heck, guys, but it's okay not to be okay. To get that initial buy-in to the program. I'd also say that that initial communication is vital. Laying out your key, what is about your program? Why should people trust you bluntly? What are the barriers to entry you've identified, and how are you mitigating for them? Because there'll always be barriers to entry, regardless of being an in-house or a third party. There will always be barriers to entry. How are you addressing those? How are you mitigating? How are you removing them? I would also say, though, you're in the easy bit, bluntly. Rolling out a program is exciting. Everyone's engaged, from the top of the business to the bottom. Everyone's thinking about it. The posters are up, the fridge magnets are out there, the cards are flying. Everyone's talking about it. It's included in the training. There'll be webinars on it. It's great. It is on the life cycle of a peer support program. It's vital, but it's also quite easy in the sense that everyone is engaged. You can get people's time. You can get people booked on the roster. It's easy. The challenging part is planning that enthusiasm, maintaining that enthusiasm through the next life cycle. So we tend to see 3-stage life cycles. So you roll out, super positive, high usage rate, it's great, everyone's excited. The middle stage will be something else comes along. There's a new RMS system. There's a new wellbeing push. There's some resilience training. Great. There's a new shiny thing that comes in and takes the management, the promotional, the communication focus away from it. And what's absolutely vital is for a successful peer support program to move into the third stage, the maintaining stage of a program. You cannot keep the level of enthusiasm and excitement that you roll out a program with throughout its entire life. It's just not possible. People have other priorities. So it's figuring out what works, what's effective, not overwhelming people, but what keeps it in the front of people's mind. Because what we know for a fact is that when people are struggling, they push support away in general. In general, they push support away, they isolate, they don't reach out, they don't do the things that would be helpful to them. So we need to ensure that peer support, however we do it, is at the front of their minds when they actually need it. So it's that maintenance phase, I think, that is so important.
Thank you, Peter. Anybody?
I agree with that. I think that the challenge is keeping it fresh, keeping reminding, but also back to that storytelling. So, we have recurrent training, we have quarterly newsletters, we have email hits that we send out to crews, we have touch points when we're all getting out there in the organization and the operation. So if you're responsible for a system and once you've done the big rollout, you've introduced it and so on, what happens 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the line? What's your plan for those constant touch points? So I have a quarterly newsletter. Every quarter in my newsletter, I have something to do with peer support. I've just asked Pete to send me the stats for the last 6 months that I could share the stats, because I want to share the increasing usage rate, because I want to show people that it's a bit of nudge theory. Hey, your colleagues are using this tool when they felt they needed to. Don't forget, you can use it too. That sort of kind of mindset. So again, what's your plan for every whatever period you think is appropriate for the size and scale of your operation and how you do it? But also when I'm out talking to crews, I'm just dropping the hint. How are you? That's my first question I always ask. Not what are you doing, not how busy is it, whatever, but just how are you generally, and talk from there. And then I might talk to someone else and say, yeah, I heard a great story from peer support the other day. Brilliant. Just dropping it in there, a little phrase, and that's the maintenance phase. Just keeping it. Doesn't need to be shouted about. It just needs to be continually reminded.
Additionally, I can just offer to create a model example from a support case. For example, beside this demonstrated commitment, which I fully agree should be regular, just create some role model examples from cases where you helped crews to improve their mental health, and this will make their word of mouth immediately within the other crews, because this case might be known, and if the other crews see, man, this person was helpful, then the trust increases automatically. Then just don't destroy it by some other cases. But if you create a case where others can observe that someone has really been profited from the case, then it's a very good starting point to roll the program. Beside, of course, the ongoing commitment which you have to demonstrate towards confidentiality and trust, etc.
I guess it's about the same as 10 years ago. I mean, IASA started in 2012, but actually at 2014 with the safety management system. Actually, nobody knew about what it's about. I mean, everybody was afraid that if you report something, that you go to jail. And if you did it wrongly, so to speak, as a management and didn't took it serious, then of course nobody wanted to report anything anymore. So I guess as a kind of an advice would be just to be proactive and just live the program, just be as a kind of an idol to say, well, even me as a manager, I call in and get my peer support. I mean, just be kind of as a, I would say, like the one who's installing it and also living it, and then inviting everybody that they will follow. And I guess it's more or less the same situation as with a safety management system, which is now kind of reached or kind of arrived our system, which is kind of part of the operation system. But with the mental health, I guess exactly where we've been 10 years ago. And so therefore, if you take the same procedures now with a different topic, I guess you get very quickly very far.
No, thank you. I think that's, thank you, Vintir. What a great discussion. We have your contact information up there on this slide, but I want to thank Colin, Peter, Matthias, and Vintir for this very informative discussion today. Please check back on the IBAC website for future webinars. This is recorded and it will be available on our website as well as the YouTube channel very soon. Hope to see you all again. Thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.